In my first few years of lifting, I would try anything to try and get some gains. And when that came to wanting to grow some big, juicy glutes, I thought that meant banding my tits to my toes to do as many glute activation exercises as possible, whilst frying my butt cheeks with some crazy glute pump routines. But the results that I achieved with these methods was the square root of diddly fuck. And if I knew then what I knew now, I would have spent a lot less time looking like a confused limp noodle and a lot more time building buns of steel. So in this video, I'm going to spill the beans of everything that I've learned over my last decade of lifting that helped me build some solid glutes. Your cheeks are made up of multiple muscles. You have your glute max, which is the big boy that takes up most of the ass. And then you have your glute medius, which is the little top shelfy bit. And then there's also the glute minimus that's wedged in there somewhere as well. And if you want to build a nice, well-rounded buttock, then you're going to want to tickle it with a variety of movements that challenge the glutes in different ways. So we're first going to go through my top 3 glute movements, which if you have in your program is going to get you pretty fucking far. Because not only do these movements work all the muscles that I've just mentioned, but they challenge the glutes for a full range of motion, with some exercise challenging it more at the lengthened range, aka when the muscle is most stretched, with others challenging it when it's most shortened, aka when it's most squeezed, which when you put all together covers all of your bases for some juicy glutes. The Romanian deadlift is hands down one of my favorite movements that I have kept as a staple within my programming for fucking years. And there's a good reason for that. One, because I absolutely love deadlifting. It's my favorite movement to do. But the sisterhood of the Romanian deadlift, she gives some perky glutes. The difference between a Romanian deadlift and a standard conventional deadlift where you're pulling the weight from the floor is that you're reducing the range of motion that you're using. So instead of just getting the weight from the floor up to your minge, I don't know why I said minge, hips, you're just using the active range of motion of your glutes and your hamstrings. So you're only going as low down as your hips go back. The result being that you don't need to use abs heavier loads to fuck up the intended muscles. And it's probably going to be slightly less tiring, emphasis on slightly. If you're doing them heavy, they still hurt, which means you can probably do a little bit more and recover a little bit better for the stimulus that you're providing. Key things to think about when setting up. You can do this with dumbbells or a barbell. I just prefer doing it with a barbell. With dumbbells, if you're doing them super heavy, which you should be over time, picking those dumbbells up from the floor can be an effort in itself. Whereas with a barbell, you can set it in the squat rack to around hip height, meaning that you don't have to waste any energy picking up that weight and getting into the set. I also just find that it's a little bit easier to grip onto the bar than it is dumbbells, which is why I tend to program them a little bit more. Now, from the top of the movement, the most important thing that you're doing with a Romanian deadlift or any deadlift variation is that you're moving the weight via a hip hinge. So again, instead of just thinking about the weight going down and up and all that jazz, you want to make sure you're bracing and hinging to keep your back in a safe position, as well as really emphasizing the cheeks that you want to be doing. And this is one cue that I find really helps initiate a hinge. I want you to imagine that you have gone shopping and you're walking your shopping back into your house. Because you're a strong bastard now, you are taking your shopping home in one load, meaning your hands are full and your farmer's carrying that fucker home. But you've run into some trouble. You've left your fucking door open. And so you need to shut it with your ass. And the way you do that is you're throwing the ass back and hinging at the hips to do so. So when you're holding the barbell or your dumbbells up at your hips, think about shutting the door with your ass, and then from there, send your ass back until it doesn't go back any further. You want to stop before your low back starts to round or before your knees start to travel forwards where you're squatting the bar down to the floor. At that point, you've gone beyond the point where your glutes are most stretched, so it's not serving us for the purpose that we have it here for. As you can see with me doing my RDL, the bar is sitting just below my knee because that is as far back as my hips go. And then once I'm getting to that position, I'm standing up by driving my hips to the bar. And once you have your RDL locked down, the next movement I recommend you tickle with for some glute growth is a hip thrust. The RDL is fantastic for challenging the glutes in the lengthened range, but the hip thrust is beautiful for challenging the glutes in the shortened range, because at the top, when you've got the squeeze, that's when that movement is most painful. But a few key things in your setup here. If your gym's lucky enough to have a glute drive machine, I recommend using that, because setting up a hip thrust can be borderline traumatic when you're loading up the plates. But if you are a peasant like me and you do need to do this with a barbell, then make sure you are using the big plates, not the little ones. Because if you're using the small plates, you will probably remove the skin from your thighs as you bring the bar into you. Not ideal. Whereas the big plates, they clear away for an easy roll up into your lap. Try to use a bench that isn't too tall. Some gym benches are literally the height of a fucking giant. I don't know why, it's weird. But hopefully your gym has ones that are around your knee height or below. But if you have an option of a slightly shorter bench compared to a longer one, go for the slightly shorter one because it tends to be more comfortable. You then want to shuffle yourself so that your bottom of your shoulder blades is resting on the edge of the pad of the bench. And if you can put a bench up against the wall to stop it from sliding around everywhere, that's not a bad idea, because you want to drive yourself back into the bench to become airborne in your hip thrust. Imagine you have a dollar bill or this magic card below your butt cheeks. Your goal is to pick up said card with your cheeks and lift the card up so it can be deposited. It can just remind you to squeeze those glutes. And as you get to the top of the thrust, you want to make sure you are fully extending the hips. So imagine pushing your tailbone between your legs, continuing to squeeze the butt so you're getting that max squeeze at the top. As one of the most common mistakes I see people make with hip thrust is that they load the bar way too heavy, lifting with their ego. And when they're thrusting up and down, they're not getting that last cheeky little inch, which is just going to be leaving some gains on the table. Now, if you are finding that you are feeling it a little bit more in your quads than your glutes, that's likely because your feet are placed too close to you. And likewise, if you feel it more in your hamstrings than your glutes, it's likely because your feet are too far away from you. And just like Goldilocks needed to hear, the place that is just right is where at the top of the movement, your knee is forming a right angle. I find it can really help before loading up the bar to do a few practice reps, potentially even recording yourself so you're finding that magic position, and do a little marker on the floor so that you know where to place your feet in between each set. And then the third type of movement I'll be doing is a form of split squat. And the two that I like to flip between is a Bulgarian split squat and a reverse lunge. But my absolute favorite variation of lunge that fucks up the glutes is the reverse lunge from a deficit in a Smith machine. And if you put these in, my God, you'll hate me, but you'll love me in equal measures. Because with the small deficit you create with a reverse lunge, it means that you can sink the lunge lower and get a deeper stretch on the glutes. And then doing it on a Smith machine rather than holding on to some dumbbells just means you don't have to fucking faff about with your balance. You often keep really good stability through the lift. And especially if you want to push that movement quite hard, the machine really supports you in doing that. So it can be quite fun. Now there's a ton more movements that are amazing for growing the glutes. And it's not a case of it's these three or nothing. Just these are three that have been staples in my glute programming, and for good reason. But there's definitely honorable mentions such as glute kickbacks, step ups, leg presses, deep squats, which will certainly come in and out of my programming. And you might actually find that you get on with those movements a bit better, because this is the thing about glute growth. The exercises are actually just one part of the pie. And as much as if you do those repeatedly and consistently, you'll see some fucking good gains, there's more to consider here. If your number one goal is to grow some peaches, then make sure your program is reflecting that. And you can do that by following these few tips. Ultimately, over the course of the week, you do want to be hitting 12 to 20 hard sets, aka sets where you are taking that within a couple reps away from failure, if not to complete failure. Because honestly, one of the most common reasons people don't see muscle growth is because they're not training hard enough. First, I'll aim to be training my glutes 2 to 3 times a week rather than just 1 time a week. Yes, you can absolutely see some good glute growth with just 1 session per week, but chances are you're either going to be able to train more sets with more frequency, and the sets that you do are probably going to be better. Think of it this way: if you are doing 20 sets of glutes on Monday, by your 10th, 11th, 12th set, your glutes are probably already dead, and you've still just tried to train them and they don't want to do anymore. Whereas if you were to split that over 2 to 3 sessions, it's likely the quality in those latter movements are going to be better if you're hitting them fresh over the course of the week. Now with this, you do want to make sure you're obviously recovering from session to session. Drawing that out as an example, that could be Monday, you could hit 5 sets of glutes with 3 sets of RDLs and 2 sets of clickbacks. Wednesday could be another 5 sets with hip thrusts and step ups. And then Friday, you could just top a little bit more up with some reverse deficit lunges. Obviously, you'll be training your other bits and bobs as well, but that's how you can fit your glutes in a higher frequency program. Now, if your absolute number one priority is really your glute growth, I would also be putting these exercises to be the first things that you're doing when you're stepping foot into the gym, after your warm up and all of that jazz. The reason being is you tend to be a fresh little whippersnapper earlier on in your sessions. So prioritizing the thing that you want to grow more early on isn't a bad idea. So when you're mapping out your program for the week, pop those exercises first, and have some fun. Now with rep ranges, this probably isn't as important as you think it is, because we've seen decent data to suggest that anywhere between 6 to 30 reps is the same amount of muscle growth so long as you are taking those sets to the same level of difficulty, aka you're training close to failure and you're looking to progressively overload over time by adding more weights and reps, etc, etc. That being said, I do find mentally it's helpful to have a rep range to shoot for, because it helps you select weights that are challenging you and you're not just kind of going through the motions. And with that, I tend to find those heavier compound movements like your Romanian deadlifts, your hip thrusts, even your lunges, they tend to fare pretty damn nicely in the 6 to 10 rep range, whereas some of the isolation movements, such as kickbacks, they tend to feel pretty nice around the 8 to 15 rep range. But honestly, with that, that's just my personal preference. And you might find that you prefer higher rep, lower weight, and you can more accurately go to failure there. Or you might find that you just really like to do lower reps for everything. But the key thing is whatever reps you are shooting for, you are training close to failure. Every couple of weeks, you're seeing progression either by adding reps, increasing weight, bettering form. And if you're doing those things, whether that's in the 6 to 10 rep range or the 15 to 20 rep range, you're going to be seeing some pretty flirty growth. And that's what you're here for anyway. Now, of course, if you want to take the faff out of all of that and not write any of your programs, then I recommend you come and join the BITS training app. We have a ton of programs with different focuses. The build program actually is focused towards glute growth, so you can do that one. And with that, you have guidance on how hard to push your sets, how to set up each movement as you do the movement. You log all your training to see that you're progressing as you should be. And if you get to a position where you really want a tushy tickle in the right direction, you can come and apply to our one-to-one coaching or our group coaching programs, where you gain the support and guidance of some absolutely incredible coaches, which is why we end up seeing results like this. One of the biggest mistakes I made when I was trying to see my physique change was actually stuff that I was doing outside of the gym. All I could give a shit about was getting leaner, leaner, leaner. I wanted to see some abs pop. And then I wondered why I wasn't really building much muscle. Because as much as when you're just starting out, you might see a little bit of body recomp where you gain muscle and lose body fat at the same time. As you train longer, so if you get into your 2nd, 3rd, 4th year of lifting, you're gonna have a really hard fucking time building muscle and losing body fat at the same time. And you're gonna be doing yourself dirty by constantly trying to be your leanest self 24/7. And I know that might sound strange to say, because every single fitness influencer you follow tends to only have pictures of them looking lean and nice lighting all year round. But quite often they would have gone through phases where they haven't been their leanest self, where they probably built the muscle that they're showing off after leaning down again. And yeah, I certainly fell into that trap. And I would spend a lot of time in prolonged deficits, or after 2-3 weeks of going out of a deficit, I would panic and go back into a deficit again, not really giving my body much chance to properly fuel the fuck up and actually build some muscle. And it was only when I started to spend prolonged periods out of a deficit, I'm talking 12 months plus, where I was actively eating at calorie maintenance, if not slightly above, that my body started to really freaking thrive. So yeah, if you're here to build bigger glutes, know that it doesn't happen in a 1200 calorie diet. And once you're consuming enough calories, you want to make sure the calories that you are consuming are also supporting your training goals. Getting 1.6 to 2 grams of protein per kilogram that you weigh is a good place to be sitting, as protein is kind of responsible for the growth and repair of muscle tissue, which is, yeah, quite helpful when you're looking to build some muscle. And I'd also be looking at prioritizing a few more of your calories to your pre-workout meals, specifically getting enough carbs in so that you have the energy to be a freaking rascal in the gym. Now, there's nothing worse than training depleted and hungry. But a fat bowl of cereal before you go in, those hit thrusts better watch out. And then outside of your nutrition, I also recommend stop being a scrolling little goblin and looking to prioritize 7 to 9 hours sleeps where you can. Sorry if you're a new parent watching this. There's still hope for you, but if you do have an opportunity to prioritize your sleep, take it, because sleep is a fantastic supplement for your body to build muscle. And if you ignore these things that I've just told you, yeah, you'll be leaving progress on the table, even if you're completely nailing your exercises, your exercise execution, and your programming. But before you go and run off to glute mortal, thrusting and hinging your way up Mount Doom, you need to hear this first. Because 100 of you could watch this video, apply everything that you've learned to the letter. In 6 months' time, you could return to me with completely different cheeks to one another. And the reason for that is not my fault, it's your mum's. and your dad's. Because genetics play a massive fucking role with any physique pursuit. I would argue this is more relevant with your glutes than it is with any other muscle group. Hear me out. People in the industry won't like me exposing this, but in the buttock area, there's a lot of people that are quite genetically blessed with where they store their body fat. Because yes, our genetic makeup from mummy and daddy does have an influence as to where we store our body fat. Some people more in the middle, some people more on the limbs, some people on the arse. So someone could never step foot in the gym yet still have a round little cheek because it's just how their body likes to store their fat. Bastards, innit? And you can't change that. What you can change is the muscle mass that you have on the bunda to a degree. Because genetics is a huge factor in how much muscle you can gain as you go into your strength training pursuits. This study shows a little bit of that as they made participants blast their biceps and monitored the amount of muscle gains that they saw. Some people saw a lot of fucking gains, whereas some people saw barely any gains and some people even lost muscle mass. That's fucking depressing. I do feel sorry for that. So even though they were doing the same program, they got very, very different results. Now, this doesn't necessarily say that some people will just never build muscle and some people will build all the muscle, but it does kind of show some people are more sensitive to muscle growth, so they do have an easier time doing it. And it also suggests that some people might need slightly different programming to one another to see better results. So tying this all together so you can actually go and grow the cheeks. I would start off by training 12 to 20 sets of glutes over 2 to 3 sessions a week. Make sure you're selecting the exercises that are training the glutes through a variety of range of motion, thrust, Romanian deadlift, and glute-focused lunges, being a holy trinity of perkiness. Keep that program the same for at least 8 weeks so you can monitor your progress, which means, yes, tracking your progress every single week and seeing if you're progressing either weekly or bi-weekly. If you are progressing, so seeing a rep added here and there, being able to go up and weight, you're grand. You don't need to change anything. Keep on fucking cracking on. If you find your progress sucks, just check in that you've actually been consistent. Have you been sleeping well? Eating your protein? Eating enough calories? Have you actually been hitting your training? Have you been taking your sets close to failure? If you're not doing those things, sort that out first. But if you have been doing those things and progress is, well, still sucking, and then you have grounds to adjust your program. If you're feeling sore, finding that you're struggling to recover, reduce the amount of sets that you're doing each workout, or try training your glutes 1 to 2 times a week rather than 2 to 3 times a week so that you're giving your body more chance to recover so you can push harder each session. But if you're not feeling sore at all and you don't feel like recovery is an issue, then look to add a few more sets over the course of the week so your body's getting enough stimulus to grow. But if you're still in doubt here of how to make your workouts work for you, then I suggest you watch this video because I take you through the realities of training hard so that you can make sure that you leave as little gains on the table as possible. Hope you enjoyed, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one.